I first met you when you spoke, gave this kind of famous Stanford talk with Bing Gordon in 2010, and you talked about internet treasures. I wonder if you could share with the audience, what is an internet treasure? Tell us what that is.
Sure. Well, and I didn't really realize that Derek, until he contacted me, was in the class, because my friend Bing, and I don't know if any of you have met Bing or heard him speak.
He's coming tomorrow.
Oh, he's coming tomorrow?
Yeah.
Great. Give him some hard questions. Bing and I taught this class ad hoc at Stanford, and I guess Derek was there, and we just kind of went crazy, and we were all over the place. I'm sure Bing will do that tomorrow. So this concept that Bing actually gave me as a gift in 2007, around when I was starting Zynga, John Doerr and Bing Gordon coined this term, internet treasure. And the idea of an internet treasure is these services that we can't remember life before or imagine life without. And they're these services that we just take for granted, and they're just part of our life stack. And what makes me optimistic as an entrepreneur, just like all of you out there, is that there's so few of them still today. And when we look at our home screen on our iPhone, or whatever device of choice you have today, Android, I'm trying to get better at Android, there's very few services that you probably can't live without. And so what's interesting for me is that they gave me this idea when I was 41. And that was pretty far into my journey as an entrepreneur. And at one point I said to Derek is that it's interesting, we as entrepreneurs can go very far in companies and throughout our career without really being aware of what our true goal is. And it's important that we separate objectives from goals. And we all make them up. I want to prove I can be a CEO, or prove I can have a real fundable company or revenues. And what I started reminding myself of is, if we don't know what our goal is, then we'll suffer a death of 1,000 compromises. And that's what my career was like until Zynga and until I got this bigger idea, because you think you can just kind of cut a deal with yourself or with this investor or other engineer or founder just to get to the next rung, and then you wake up one day and you haven't built a house that you want to live in. And that's what happened to me. I'd started 4 other companies and I hadn't stayed at them, even one company that lasted 10 years. So this idea of an internet treasure was this bigger, bolder idea that was something I knew I wanted to pursue for a long time. And it made me much more intellectually disciplined. And so once you know your goal, you know what you can't let go of. And that's really important. And that's one piece of advice I want to give you as you think. It's like, if you're intellectually disciplined and you write down what you will not let go of, then you have to learn to say no to a lot of things. And the one story I'll just say that I mentioned to Derek is, I made it very hard on myself. Oh, thank you. Some caffeine. I made it very hard on myself to raise money for Zynga. And even though we were actually cash flow positive, which is rare for a startup, and we were growing quickly, I made it much harder to raise money because I wanted to align interests with investors, because I knew that if you don't bring in investors, if your early team and your investors aren't on the same path and ride that you're on, it's just going to cause you so many problems down the line. And so what I did, and I'm not recommending you do this, don't do this at home, but what I did was, I would say to the investors, potential investors, let me just tell you over the phone the top 10 reasons why you're not going to want to invest in my company. And if you still want to talk after that, great, then I'll show you my PowerPoint and do whatever and meet. Sure. And almost every one of them thanked me and said, thank you so much for not wasting my time. I definitely don't want to meet with you. And I said, these were things like, we're never going to sell the company unless we fail, because we want to build something sustainable over the long term. I'm your partner, not your employee. I'm going to have control so that this company can stay on the vision that we set out and not ever leave that vision, whether it's selling or whatever. And you get minority protection rights and whatever, but we're gonna be equal partners here in this board. And you're on the board by mutual selection, not by legal right. And this is an important point, that our boards are the DNA of our company. And we kind of just sell that down the river like it's nothing. Like, oh, it's XYZ firm, which partner do I get? Oh no, right? Like, I really wanted the other partner. And if you think about the person matters a lot, and they're who you're gonna go through this with, you start to make different decisions. So it's just to say I made it very, very hard in raising money. Almost every investor I talked to turned us down, but it paid off later.
And so can you talk about setting goals and objectives? Like, just talk us through the mechanics of that. You're literally writing them down? Are you telling other people? Are you putting them somewhere? Are you like pacing them in the shower? Like, how do you actually achieve these goals?
Well, what we did pretty early on, and this was something John Doerr taught us, was, I don't know if maybe it's common now here that people use OKRs. Does everyone know OKRs? Nobody. Okay, it's not common. Objectives and key results. So what we did from early on, this was something first developed by Andy Grove at Intel, and then Google uses it now, and apparently Uber, because in whatever their controversy, that female engineer said that she got all her OKRs done. I was really impressed Uber had OKRs. So objectives and key results. So we started acting kind of like a grown-up public company early on, and we would set one objective and 3 measurable key results for every single group in the company, and that actually scaled all the way. We still use it as a company.
One thing I heard about, and you can tell me if this is true or not, but that even at the very early days, you would have employees send you specifically every week, specifically things that they were going to accomplish over the next week, and this was like
actually the next day.
Was it the next day? Oh wow, okay.
Well, yes. So I wasn't going to go into this, but I will. Is this
about Zuckerberg?
No, this is not.
Okay.
Nothing
good.
but love.
Thank you.
All right.
Nothing but love for Mark.
So I think that micromanagement is an underrated management skill. And it's been, I think Steve Jobs brought it back a little bit, but come on, I mean, what really matters at the end of the day is, like, I think of every engineering day is like another shot on goal. It's another bullet. And you don't want to waste them, and you owe it to your engineers and yourself. So in the very beginning, I had every single person's name in a spreadsheet, and we had a stand-up call every morning, and we would go through and say, what were you supposed to do yesterday? Did you do it? What are you doing today? And we kept doing that until we were maybe, I don't know, 45 or 50 people, and the call would start to get to like 2 hours. And it worked pretty well, you know. So I kind of feel like micromanage until you can't micromanage any longer, and then turn that into a process only because you have to.
The most productive person that I've ever met is this guy that started this company called Qualtrics. His name is Jared Smith, and the thing he does on the same point is he puts a Post-it note every day. There are 3 things he has to get done, and he will not answer emails. He will not look at Slack. He will not do anything except, and people will call him and say, does this have, like, what is this? Doesn't have to do my 3 things, click. And it's this relentless focus on goals, and also, as you're saying, like, you got to get this done today, or it's not going to be, or, you know, you're gonna have trouble tomorrow.
Yeah, and I as long as I was CEO, I met with every new employee who came into Zynga, and it got to be bigger and bigger groups. But one of the things I would always say is, write down for some reason I always think Sunday's the best day, but write down what your P1s are. Look at last week's and then look at this week. You can never possibly have more than 3 P1s. If a P1 is something that's such a high priority, you have to get it done this week, it's just not really possible to have more. 3 is a lot.
Yeah.
And then that became something that was an email that everyone had to send up the chain every Sunday, and people complained it took too many hours to write the email. I'm like, if you only have 3 priorities or less, how can it take you hours to write an email about it? But they didn't like it.
When did you first realize that mobile gaming was going to be a big thing?
Well, it was actually long before mobile gaming. In 2007, which is 10 years ago now, gaming, people don't remember that the video game industry was mature and declining. and not considered a good place to spend your time and money. You know, because you were at EA and you lived through it. But it was all the companies were in decline. My insight, and I love a market that's already really big and it's declining and people kind of think it's done and over, and yet there's huge latent demand. There's huge group of consumers who aren't even involved in the market, and that was gaming. It was like the perfect storm. I like to say it was like search before Google got there. So my big insight, I didn't come from the gaming industry, and I'm a casual gamer in the sense of I don't have the attention span to read rules, to read anything. I like to say our audience often has the attention span of a third grader, and they usually have more care about this. So our idea was, can we make games accessible for busy adults? And what's interesting is the gaming industry was this red bloodbath of an ocean, and the casual gaming market was this huge, it's still a huge opportunity, and mobile only blew it up more. So it was a good opportunity.
And at that time, as you said, like, we're always taught, like, hey, build your team, have a great product and find a great market. And no one, as you just said, no one would have ever said that the video game market was a great market in 2006, 2007. It was not. It was, these 300-person engineering teams building huge console games that cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And you came in with this alternative, and I, like, as we're meeting with investors, as we're making the pitch on our products, like, these opportunities, it's always obvious in hindsight, right? But at the time, I just wonder, you've got investors telling you no. Yeah. You've got the industry basically saying, no, this isn't going to work. What made you break through and say, like, we're going to do this anyways, and this is going to work?
Well, you left another key audience out that was not impressed with what I was doing, which was my peers. And I also like to say, if you're really in this, you should burn your resume, and you should not seek respect from your peers, because if they think what you're doing is smart, then you might not be onto the right thing, because a lot of other people are. And the best, actually, only in retrospect, is when people kind of laugh at you. And people definitely laughed at me. And Dave McClure, who's out here, I think people like Dave McClure felt sorry for me, because I was doing apps on Facebook. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but in 2007, apps on Facebook were not considered very valuable to people in the world. It was like throwing virtual drinks and stuff.
Quizzes.
This is before quizzes. Quizzes was way more valuable than, that's down the line. So people felt sorry for me. Dave Morin took me out for coffee, and he was in charge of developer relations, and he said, Mark, anything but games. I mean, they're not viral, and they're never going to work on our platform. And there's so many better ideas. Why don't you do a wall app? I was like, I think games are a good idea. I'm sorry no one else likes it. But and then the funniest thing is, I was sitting in this room at Facebook, and this terrific woman, Ruchi, she was like, I think somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks out of college, and she was running this whole room, and I'm sitting there in this little college desk or high school desk with all these other college kids, and I'm like 41, and I've got my pen out, and I'm trying to catch everything about the API, and it was just funny. You can't have too much dignity, and ego to be sitting there. So it's good in retrospect, but it's good when the rest of the world laughs a bit at what you're doing and isn't necessarily that impressed. But what did we know? I think, look, I had the benefit of having failed in social networking.
Yeah, let's talk. Can we talk about? Yeah. Let's talk about Tribe. Yeah.
How'd you know that was Tribe? Okay.
No, sorry. Well, look, you founded Tribe, which was created as sort of one of the first social networks, right? And it was, it's the right idea. It was pre-Facebook, pre-everything, really. So, why didn't that become Facebook? What happened?
Well, you probably all heard and internalized Silicon Valley is famous for this idea of fail fast, right? No? Yes?
Yes,
okay.
of course.
All right. Just checking. Okay. I failed slowly with Tribe, really slowly. Not what you're supposed to do. The big lesson that I got at Tribe, so I like to talk about this idea that we as entrepreneurs can isolate, if we can isolate our winning instincts from our losing ideas, then we can change our odds of winning. And what I mean by that is, we all have these instincts as entrepreneurs and humans. There's these human needs, especially if we're in the consumer space. I will tell you, and you can look it up, that in 2002, I registered the domain name smstaxi.com. I can tell you that I had the instinct and the idea to order a taxi through your phone. Turns out I had the right instinct and a bad idea. It's a good thing I didn't do it. I don't think it would have worked. With Tribe, I think I had at least 3 winning instincts and 1 bad idea. And I hung on to that bad idea, and I went down with the ship. And don't do that, and don't let your friends do that. Separate that instinct and kill that idea. If you start out thinking your instincts are almost always right and your ideas are usually wrong, not always, but usually, it's gonna free yourself. If you're not attached to the idea, you can shoot it all the time. And so with Tribe, I got it wrong. Local was right. Messaging with groups was right. Jobs was right. Social networking, you had to try to fail at social networking in 2003. I mean, that's when email invites worked. People are like, oh, really? Someone wants to be my friend? Click. That doesn't happen anymore, right? So I had to really, really want to fail, and I did. And I got so many things wrong in the idea, but I just stuck to it. And in today's parlance, my D7 retention was terrible. My D30 retention was terrible. But I just stuck it out in some weird, courageous sinking with a ship. I wasn't going to do that with Zynga. What I changed was I said, I'm going to test everything. Now, testing is useless if you don't have good ideas to start with. And I think there's a whole science of PMing where people are saying one idea is 5 times better than the other, but they're both bad. We don't want to do that. So you got to start out with some good ideas to test. But if you do, what I tried to do with Zynga was, and I still try to do it, is never waste an engineering day. If you want 80% of your engineering days to be a shot on goal, you're going to act different. I say to our teams, even now, well, how do you know that's a good idea? Why are you bothering our engineers? Why are you making them, they're usually the ones who work the nights and weekends. Why are you making them do that before you even know if it's a good idea? Shame on you. Our friend Bing Gordon, he'll probably talk about this tomorrow. I'll steal his thunder. He sat in my product roadmap meeting while he was still at EA, and they're like, why is this weird old dude in our meetings when he works for the competition? And I said, because he has good ideas and we like them. And he said to us, we were working on a new idea for poker, and he said, what's the 5 words you're going to use to market that idea when you turn it on? And nobody knew. And he said, well, why are you building it? So it's still true to this day that you can, put it out there as if you've built it and see if it works before you bother the engineers. And it's amazing to me that that's still a new idea.
The insight of shooting your ideas is phenomenal. And I don't know if entrepreneurs, if we have to learn that the hard way in order to understand that, because I have wasted so much money and so many years and so much time building things that I thought were going to be great and never getting feedback on anybody else. I don't do it anymore. I won't do it. I only build what my customers want. I only build features and products that I'm asked to build and that someone's going to pay me for. And so I wonder, how do I detach myself from this thing that is it's almost like you're a new child. You're so attached to it. And when someone rips on it, it's like it feels like someone just made fun of your kid. So how do I detach myself from my ideas?
I just think you have to you have to be intellectually disciplined and want to win so much that you're willing to put your ego and your team's egos aside. And it seems like, I don't know, it seems like a lot of people just aren't that ambitious. It just seems like a lot of people want their steak dinner inside the Matrix more than they want to, win. People got that reference.
How do you empower everyone to be a CEO?
Well, so I've had this management philosophy ever since my second company when I was 30, 31, and I was just learning to be a CEO, of make everyone a CEO. And it's one of the core principles that I built Zynga on and every company. And the idea, it only works if you completely do it. You can't partially do it. But the idea is that if you make everyone in your company a CEO, that you're going to get far more out of people, far more scale as a company, and get people who are more inspired. And at my company, support.com, in the early days, we had 35 people, and I put a big white sticky sheet on the wall, and I wrote everyone's names, and I said, by the end of the week, you have to say what it is you're CEO of, and it has to matter, so everyone else can go look at it and see who's doing what. And it seems to have worked, and then we made that one of our core values at Zynga. But I also have learned over the years, you can't just take anybody and say, now you're a CEO. Because some people are like, I'm the CEO, bitch, get back. Mark Zuckerberg's card in the beginning said CEO, bitch, right? I don't think I'm giving anything away.
No.
Okay, good. I don't want to give anything away. But one of the underlying philosophies that I found that helps with this everyone's a CEO is to bring in a certain kind of people. And I liked, especially at Zynga, to bet on people who I kind of said had broken resumes, or they're expert witnesses. And so many of us become entrepreneurs because we are an expert witness. And I like to say, and I was in my 20s, that's why I was kind of fired from every job I was at, pretty much every job. I was not an entrepreneur by choice, okay? Most of you are probably by choice, and I respect that. I just had to do it. But the expert witness is someone who's closest to the answer and furthest from the decision. And they are told to pay their dues. And I don't think you should pay your dues. And I like these people that want to skip levels and not do that. And the broken resume is somebody who, they've been CEO of a potentially great company or an exciting startup, and it hasn't worked out. And in fact, I have an amazing guy who runs our growth group at Zynga now, this guy Mark Cantor, and he ran the most viral wall app on Facebook in the early days called Graffiti. And I think I've said this to him, he's a broken resume, and he's fucking kick-ass. Like, we're so lucky, because the guy knows he's been in it.
Yeah.
And if you can find people like that, they can be CEOs.
Let's talk about scaling. I've heard you talk about that no one plans for everything to go right. We always plan for things to go wrong. And I am the worst at this. Like, I always start with, like, here's the worst scenario of what could happen. It's like, so.
It is good to ask yourself, what would it look like if everything went right? And spend almost equal time on that.
Yeah, what does that mean? Tell us, and why is that?
Well, I just think that, first of all, it's good to visualize what would that look like if everything went right. But I just think we spend too much, you got to balance it, but we spend too much time playing out, there's two things I want to balance. On the one hand, these are going to sound contradictory. On the one hand, inside our company, I say kill hope because hope will kill you. I don't think hope is your friend as an entrepreneur. Someone else said hope's not a strategy. It's not a good thing. Optimism's good, hope's bad. On the other hand, though, we do want to say to each other, what does it look like if everything goes right? And we do want to make sure that we are ready for that scenario and planning for that.
On scaling internally, what are the positive and negatives? What happens as you start to scale internally? And one thing I would share, I worked at EA for 4 years. It was my first job out of college. And what happened in the early days with Zynga is, in the beginning, you start sucking out all the best talent from EA because all the smartest people are like, well, this is a cooler opportunity. Like, I'm going to go do that, and I want to build the future. And then probably over time, then it starts to become sort of opportunistic. People start, oh, well, like, everybody's doing that, right? So you sort of in the beginning of your startup, you're getting these really core people to your mission and your values, and then this happens with any company. Then you start to just attract this different kind of person. How do you scale people? How do you keep those people out? And then other processes internally, how do you do that?
Well, I could talk for a lot more than 5.5 minutes about this topic. And I'm kind of torn because I think for a lot of you, if you're at early points in trying to build a successful business, you're not really worried yet about scale and what happens when everything goes right and this is a real rocket ship. And there's definitely some things I feel like I got right on scale, and there's even more things that I know I got wrong. And on the right side, if you keep thinking ahead of the stage that you're at, and you're spending more time than you need to be spending. So if the thing in front of you is my product, getting out, my launch, my funding, but you go even further than that and you start sitting down and asking your co-founders and people like, well, what is our goal and what are our values and mission? And you write these things down. It can feel a little funny at first, and I get a weird feeling when people are on stage and they talk a lot about culture, because I think culture really matters, but I don't think it's something that you can like put on a whiteboard and talk about. But definitely for us, we got to this mission early on of connecting the world through games, and it stuck, and people saw meaning in that. And in a lot of ways, the part to get right in scale, and let me tell you what right and wrong. The right is, the only value of scale, I think, is you want people to do the right thing when you're not in the room. That's scale. Like, scale is, hey, I really hope I can be not in the room, not on a phone call for 2 hours, asking every person what they did yesterday, and something good will happen without me. That's just dumbing it down. That feels like what scale is. On the negative side, I've kind of used the term fuck scale. Because I think you do all this stuff in pursuit of scale, and I don't think your customers really give a shit about scale. I got an email today from this guy in the UK, and he doesn't like our Hit It Rich slot game. And he said, you know what, you'll probably never read this, but I pay you £15 a month, and I never win. And I don't feel like that's good value. And now, it's supposed to be random, so I don't know if he wants us to like fix it so he wins, which we do not do. But he doesn't care whether or not we scale. He cares whether he has a great experience. So again, I kind of think micromanagement is this beautiful thing, if you could pull it off. That I think that a very good entrepreneur or CEO stays close to the metal, stays close to their customer. And what I got wrong with my company, and I think it's hard, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs and some of you, when you go through a rocket ship phase, will get this wrong too. Maybe not, now that you heard me. You think you're doing things in pursuit of scale, and you're really leaving your customer. And if what made you successful was that you were the most brilliant person in your company at products, and now you're going to spend all your time on HR and PR and IR and whatever else, you're probably not going to have better days ahead, right? If you're the star player and what you're great at is empathizing with your customers and great products and getting engineers to build innovations, you better keep doing that. Don't try to learn to be something that you're not. And even worse, you bring in these people and they've been at Amazon or Google and they can don't worry, I know scale. No, they don't. They may know it somewhere else. They don't know it where you're at. They don't know how to serve that player in the UK who isn't happy about the way the slots game's going. And I made that mistake. And you level and layer, and you get further and further from your customer, and you spend less and less time, and you kind of know it while it's happening, and it's like quicksand. And I hope you don't go through that. I hope you do it better than I did.
Tell us about, what are you working on now?
I am working on, this isn't exactly announced, but I guess I'm saying it publicly. All right, I'm working on this is gonna sound random, but I'm working on this new web-based political party called Win the Future, WTF, and you get it? I kind of feel like WTF is the only way we can kind of describe this moment. I just find myself saying it a lot. And so I want to make politics more accessible to normal, busy people, all right? I want to make it so that you can have voice and choice in this system. And the idea is not a third party. The idea is just, there's nothing wrong with the Democratic Party that's there. We just need to take it over. So the idea is just, let's just take this thing over and let's make it useful. So that's, and it's kind of crazy. We'll see where we get.
How do you we didn't even talk at all about any of your angel investing, which is really, legendary is really what it is. I mean, the companies that you've invested in. We even talked about all these other things you've done. that have been successful. How do you at this point, like, I mean, like, you could ride off easily into the sunset. You don't probably need to work any longer if you don't want to. Like, what challenges you at this point? Why are you still here, right? I mean, honestly, like, you don't need money. You don't need accolades. You've worked, I've heard about the way you work. You are an incredibly hard worker. So what still drives you at this point, and what do you hope to get out of it?
Well, I mean, I think as an entrepreneur, especially if you have a few successes, you kind of go through a midlife crisis every couple of years. And hopefully they get further apart because things last longer. And Zynga's going on 10 years, which I'm really happy and proud of. But I honestly, I didn't need to work when I started. I didn't need to keep working when I started Zynga. And it was really this idea of this internet treasure. I think of, like, what kind of legacy do we leave in the world? And I think we have this opportunity to build these kind of virtual skyscrapers of our time and things that could really impact people for decades to come, and they are impacting everyone in the world, and that's really awesome. So I think I invest, but it's just not as satisfying because you just putting up money for something, you can feel smart or like you were a little part of it, but it's not the same thing as taking an idea that you have or with other people and really instantiating it. And then there's just such a joy in seeing millions of people moved by something that you've done. And we have this amazing network now that we can do it with. So now it's like, wow, like there's so few things on my iPhone that I care about. I feel like I could add one more, and that's what makes me, and I think, and I don't know, I also feel like this is kind of our philanthropy. Like, I don't really want to just go and give money to charities. There's nothing wrong with them, but I feel like I can help more people if I build something meaningful.
You're actively doing something.
Yeah.
Mark Pincus, thank you very much for being here. Thank you.
Thanks.